friends, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to talk about Smash Up, Travel Edition. Last week, I got some great reception to the idea of the pre-constructed base deck, and friend of the channel Gabriel Holland requested the faction equivalent. If you had to drill all the factions down to a list of 20 you could easily travel with, which would you pick? I love the challenge of this idea, despite my long-standing suffering from a condition that I call variability bias, which means I get frustrated when choosing from an incomplete set. If I had the whole set but played as Steampunk Tricksters, I'd be excited. But if you told me that I only had the core and awesome level 9000, I'd feel restricted in my choice. I like the illusion of having access to everything. But I also have an unsleeved Big Geeky box and a sleeved Bigger Geekier box, and the latter rarely leaves my house, because it's impractical. I am, however, a big fan of my quiver carrying cases. I have two, which is perfect for travel card games. I brought these to conventions to have lightweight access to many games that I love in a travel-friendly form. So if I were making a quiver for Smash Up, what 20 factions would I include? Because of the travel nature, I want to focus on diversity of abilities, but also new player friendliness. The factions should be relatively straightforward to play to the best extent possible to teach new players, while also preventing overpowered combos to the best extent possible. Because this is an all-star style, where everyone gets a spot to highlight each expansion, there won't always be a perfect fit, but I really like this assortment. The travel nature means that Munchkin is impractical, especially if you use a pre-constructed base deck, but I am including Cthulhu. If you want to swap out Cthulhu to avoid 30 Manus cards, I wouldn't blame you, but they are on the list. For this list, I'll go in chronological order first, then circle back to the duplicates, as they will get removed over time as more factions come out to maintain the all-star format. My core representative set is Wizards, representing extra action plays. Everyone can benefit from what the Wizards offer, and they are pure support with a nice mix of card draw, extra actions, and extra minions. They are also good enough that you don't need to include their Titan unless it's needed for balance purposes, and you should have no problem creating parity with these factions. My awesome representative is Steampunks. They are a great mix of movement and power while representing base attachments. A quick scan looking at the mechanic will tell you that they are replaying powerful actions, which will naturally cause them to look at their candidates, which are Rotary Slug Thrower and Agromotive. The Steampunks are still relevant today, and they seem to be getting better and better, having held up nicely. They are not antagonistic, which makes them even more straightforward and a good candidate to give to a new player. My Cthulhu representative is the Elder Things. This is a hard choice, but I chose Elder Things because it's easier for a new player to play as them rather than against them. The antagonism that they bring does not really stop the scoring of bases, it just hurts the player, so unlike a destruction faction, the game progresses nicely and they get a better feel for it. Outside of a few missing keywords from the errata, the game plan of Flood and Stomp is very straightforward, and having light recursion is also a good thing. I also think that they best represent madness and justify the need for including the deck. My science fiction representative is Cyborg Apes, representing minion attachments. Powerful, straightforward, and fun. I think Cyborg Apes not only have a strong thematic appeal, but a mechanical one as well. They incrementally make themselves better and serve as a headliner for many of the partners in this set. You can point to a few key cards that explain their whole strategy, and they have a bit of card draw to facilitate that strategy as well. My monster representative is Mad Scientists, the only monster faction without a Titan. They don't need one, but they offer an intro to power counters while also being a heavy engine faction. They are pretty versatile in their cards, offering a mix of power, extra plays, pivoting, and defensive abilities. I also love many of the combos that they create on this list. Mythic Horses represent the Pretty expansion as the Swarm faction. There are other Swarm factions out there, but Mythic Horses I think are the most versatile and consistent, combining power, extra plays, card draw, and movement. Their ceiling is incredibly high, but so is their floor, and despite that, it's harder to make them broken with the combos I've chosen. And since there aren't many other Swarm combos in the set, I'd feel comfortable including them. The superheroes represent It's Your Fault. There's been a lot of superhero hate lately, and I'm not sure why. They must be a love 'em or hate 'em faction, because myself and others I trust swear by them. They are self-synergistic, but also give you instant access to your partner leaders. And with the leaders in this selection, they'd be fantastic. I think players sometimes forget the ability canceling or threat of the burst that they offer. So much emphasis is put on the weakness of the mild-mannered citizen, but if we are trading plays, I like the battle of attrition because I'm stalling until I get my 5s. But I'm not here to debate superheroes. They are unique and deserve to be here, and form great pairings as a result. I chose the Star Roamers for Cease and Desist because they don't get featured enough but offer an intriguing twist on movement and returns. They are an engine-heavy faction with the ability to stall, and some really interesting cards that always get me excited. The Star Roamers are one of those factions that has the ability to pair well unexpectedly with many others, and their tool set looks good in this list as a result. They have the potential for extra plays and recursion, despite being disguised as a move and return faction, and act as a suitable replacement for more iconic factions that would be problematic if included. We can't have an all-star list without my favorite faction, the Rockstars, and I've said repeatedly how they have access to seemingly every non-antagonistic mechanic in the game. They have unique cards whose limitations actually form a coherent, self-strategizing game plan, and that's great for new players. They also have extreme card draw and exude confidence. They are a swarm in the groupie sense, and Mythic Horse Rockstars could be a little excessive, but they are in general a great fit for this list. Plus, if I'm the one traveling, I'd want them to be there. Rounding out the top half of the All-Star list is in fact the All-Stars. I go back and forth as to how balanced this faction actually is, but I do enjoy playing them, and I think that they have accessible tutoring in that it is limited, but not limiting. What I mean is that it is few in quantity, but fairly direct, preventing analysis paralysis as a result. They also have an action chain that sells the game pretty well, focusing on cool plays and making you think how to combine your cards. It also gives a sneak peek into other factions not included on this list, and I think it's a good way to pique the interest and get them asking about factions beyond the travel set. I chose Itty Critters to represent Big in Japan, and I admit that this is not a newcomer-friendly faction, but there aren't really any good options. They do, however, act as a great challenge faction for that next step, while providing plenty of replayability because of their dynamic nature and the lack of a scripted game plan. There are great partners in here for them, as you basically have 4 Flu Fairies with Wizards, great support plays for Captain Ahab on another base, a great mild-mannered citizen target, and don't forget about Elder Things and Bayaki. My 70s representative is the Kung Fu Fighters. While the mad scientists introduce power counters, how they use it is very different from how Kung Fu uses it, and I think there is room for both. Also, I wouldn't recommend any of the others for new players necessarily, even though I do like truckers. This is one of the options for the list that I chose last, and I did so because of the pairing potential. They have interesting plays with superheroes, cyborg apes, and a few others on this list. My lack of overall excitement is less about KFF and more indicative of the problems of that 70s in general, but I remain confident in this choice. It would be Disco, but they are way too difficult to explain. If you did not care about teachability, then put in Disco. Otherwise, Kung Fu is a solid choice. Under no circumstance should dueling be taught to new players, nor should they experience the frustration of Vikings. That leaves Ancient Egyptians by default, but I happen to love them. Rules-wise, they are the easiest to explain, but probably the hardest to play, and act like a challenge faction like Itty Critters. I do think there is a lot more potential to AE than people realize, and they offer a unique path to extra plays that no one ever considers broken, which more than justifies its inclusion on the list. The Mounties are my pick for International Incident. Not only are the Mounties straightforward to play, but they represent the rare faction not playing for a solo base. They want to engage and overtake the enemy, and have great fun beating opponents by 1 power whenever possible. They use their mix of power and movement in a way different from steampunks, and I think there is definitely room for both, and I love mixing the two together. My Culture Shock representative is Anansi. While Culture Shock is not the most new player friendly example, Anansi is a second or third game challenge faction that can be paired with almost anything because of their card draw and deck searching. They also provide a unique game experience, one that I happen to love, so I would want them to be in this list, and not just because they are my second favorite faction. It's their universal appeal that carries them for this type of restricted set. So that's 15 of 20 factions covering all the major expansions. The remaining 5 can get removed as new factions get added, but I wanted to start with the dinosaurs as the first replacement candidate. No, I don't think dinosaurs are perfect, but they are new player friendly and are more consistent than people give them credit for. They form some great pairings with the ones I have included on this list and represent pure power. As I've mentioned other times, I do enjoy a good dinosaur pairing, and in this list, you have Kung Fu Fighters, All-Stars, Itty Critters, Star Roamers, Anansi, and many others who can bring out the best of them. We don't actually have a faction representing destruction, and that's because destruction doesn't always work out in your favor. As I say many times, I prefer to use your power rather than remove it. I think sharks are the exception. While they aren't my favorite, they at least give destruction a purpose and best represent the mechanic in my opinion. They also provide enough destruction that they can survive without their partner enhancing it, even though there are some natural partners in this list. The kitty cats can further increase destruction, but here they are a representative of control. If you get Queen Fluffy and Whiskers out, it can be brutal. While their inclusion on the list does create a few insufferable combos, it creates many more intriguing ones, and because of the relative parity of this list, you can overcome the kitty cats if you prepare accordingly. But having another antagonistic faction, which are rare in this list, is not the worst, especially since they attack you in a unique way. The Sumos are another easy-to-understand faction that pairs well with most because of their card draw. They also have powerful opponent movement that serves as a foil to destruction, which I happen to really like. Again, when you look at what's in the list, you see Anansi, superheroes, rock stars, mad scientists, tons of great potential for the Sumos. For my final pick, I'd really love to include the Ultimates from Marvel as my movement faction, but they aren't out yet. In the meantime, the Tornadoes are a good replacement, representing pure movement. I feel bad for Moosnado because they drew the short straw, but including Tornadoes gives you Sharknado, as well as a number of interesting plays that make use of your Tornado specials. I do think that the Ultimates are more consistent overall and a better fit, but Tornadoes will keep their spot warm until they are released later this month. So there we have it, 20 factions highlighting the expansions over the years, with a good collection of smash-up mechanics to avoid staleness. If I were playing in person, I'd definitely consider making a quiver like this for travel or conventions. What's your favorite combination from this list? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.